You're looking for which boyfriend gave you directions but you can't block the lane. Turn it around. The words hung in the humid afternoon air mixed with the smell of exhaust and melting asphalt. Erica Walsh sat perfectly still behind the wheel of her sedan, her hands resting lightly at 10 and 2. The air conditioning in her car hummed, fighting a losing battle against the baking sun, but she didn't roll up the window. She just looked at the young senior airman leaning down toward her, his sunglasses reflecting her own face back at her. She wore a sleeveless royal blue top, the fabric light and professional, chosen specifically for the moving day heat. Her long blonde hair was down, cascading over her shoulders in loose waves that seemed to offend the young man standing guard at the main gate of Heritage Air Force Base. He was already sweating through his camouflage uniform, a sheen of perspiration on his upper lip, and his patience had clearly evaporated hours ago. "I am not looking for a boyfriend, Airman," Erica said. Her voice was calm, almost dangerously level. It was a tone that had once directed a stack of C-17s through a hostile corridor during a sandstorm, but to the young man in the beret, it just sounded like entitlement. "I am reporting for duty. I need you to scan my CAC key so I can proceed to headquarters." The airman, whose name tape read Miller, let out a short, sharp laugh. He stood up straight, adjusting his belt with a theatrical sigh, and looked back at the guard shack where a technical sergeant was watching with bored amusement. Miller turned back to Erica, shaking his head. "Reporting for duty?" he repeated, dragging the vowels out in a mockery of her tone. "Look, lady, I see this 10 times a week. You're a spouse, maybe a contractor, or maybe you're just meeting someone at the club, but you don't have a base sticker. Your car is packed with boxes, and you're dressed like you're going to a brunch. Do not lie to me. It's a federal offense to present false information at a military installation." Erica didn't blink. She reached into the center console, her movements deliberate and slow so as not to startle him. She produced her common access card, the white plastic rectangle that held her entire career encoded in a microchip. She held it out the window. "Scan the ID, Airman Miller," she said. Miller didn't take it. He crossed his arms over his chest, blocking the scanner with his body. He looked down at her with a smirk that suggested he held all the cards. "I'm not scanning anything until you drop the attitude," he said. "You want on my base, you show some respect. You address me by my rank, and you tell me the truth. Who is your sponsor? Is it your husband? Dad? Because there is no way in hell you are reporting for duty looking like a sorority girl on summer break." The line of cars behind Erica began to grow. A horn honked in the distance, a short, impatient blast that made Miller twitch. He looked over Erica's car to the line building up, then back at her with renewed irritation. "You're holding up traffic," he snapped. "Last chance. Turn it around or I'm calling it in as a gate runner." Erica withdrew her hand but didn't put the ID away. She placed it on the dashboard, the gold chip glinting in the sunlight. She looked at Miller, really looked at him, noting the scuffs on his boots and the way his beret was formed slightly off-center. "Call your NCO," she said. Now Miller's face went red. "Oh, you want to speak to the manager. Typical." He turned and waved violently at the guard shack. "Sergeant Vance, we got a live one." Technical Sergeant Vance emerged from the shack, a clipboard in hand. He was older, heavier, with the weary look of a man who counted the days until retirement. He walked over slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel, and stood next to Miller. He didn't look at Erica initially. He looked at Miller. "What's the problem, Miller?" Vance asked, his voice growly. "She's refusing to follow instructions, Sergeant," Miller said, gesturing at the blue sedan. "Claims she's reporting for duty, won't give me a sponsor name, just demanding I scan her card and blocking the lane. I told her to turn around and she's refusing to move." Vance finally looked down at Erica. He took in the royal blue blouse, the expensive sunglasses, the long blonde hair that reached halfway down her back. He let out a sigh that rattled in his chest. "Ma'am?" Vance said, his tone dripping with condescension disguised as politeness. "We have operational security protocols here. We can't just let anyone in because they say so. If you're a dependent, you need to have your sponsor meet you at the visitors center. That's the building to the right before the gate. You need to pull out of line and go there." "I am not a dependent, Sergeant," Erica said. "I am the incoming installation commander."
The silence that followed lasted only a second before Miller snorted. Vance didn't laugh, but his expression hardened into something ugly. He leaned down, placing his hands on the door frame of her car, invading her space. "Okay, that's enough," Vance said. "Impersonating an officer is a serious crime, lady. You think because you watched a few movies you can drive up here and tell us you're running the place. The base commander is Colonel Walsh." "I am Colonel Walsh," Erica said. Vance shook his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Colonel Walsh is a pilot, a combat veteran. I saw the bio. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the blue fabric of her top. You look like you sell real estate. You honestly expect me to believe that you, looking like that, are a colonel? Where's your uniform? Where's your shave? Where's your bearing?" "I'm on leave status until 0800 tomorrow, officially," Erica replied, her voice remaining steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks, hence the civilian attire. "But my orders are in the system. If you scan the card, Sergeant, you will see my rank, my clearance, and my assignment." Vance stood up and stepped back, signaling to Miller. "She's not just confused, she's delusional," Vance said to Miller, loud enough for Erica to hear. "Probably a mental health issue, or she's testing our security. Either way, she's not coming in." Vance looked back at Erica. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Erica frowned. "Excuse me?" "Step out of the vehicle," Vance commanded, his hand drifting toward the radio on his shoulder. "You are disrupting gate operations and refusing to follow lawful orders. You want to play games? Fine. We'll search the car, verify your identity the hard way, and then we'll have the local PD come pick you up for trespassing." "This is a mistake, Sergeant," Erica said, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. "A very expensive mistake for you." "Is that a threat?" Vance barked. "Get out of the car now." Erica stayed seated. She knew the regulations better than they did. She knew that exiting the vehicle would escalate the situation to a physical confrontation, one where they would feel justified in restraining her. She needed to de-escalate, but they were giving her no room to maneuver. "I am maintaining my position until a superior officer arrives," Erica stated. "There is no superior officer coming for you, sweetheart," Vance sneered. "I'm the flight chief. I'm the authority here." The heat inside the car was stifling, but a different kind of heat was radiating through Erica's chest. It was a familiar sensation, a tightening of the gut that she hadn't felt since she was a lieutenant flying in the back of a cargo plane, listening to the loadmaster scream that the cargo had shifted. Flash, the smell of hydraulic fluid and ozone, the screech of the warning klaxon, a younger Erica, hair tied back in a severe bun, wrestling the yoke of a massive aircraft as the horizon tilted violently, a voice in her headset, panic-stricken. "We're losing altitude, Lieutenant." Her own voice cutting through the static, calm and absolute. "I have the aircraft. Stow the cargo. We are not going down today." The feeling of the vibration in her hands, the sheer force of will required to level the wings against the turbulence. The memory was gone as quickly as it came, summoned by the vibration of a heavy truck engine idling in the lane next to her. She blinked, refocusing on the concrete gate and the two men who saw only a blonde woman in a blue shirt, not the pilot who had saved a crew of 6 from a mountain ridge in the Hindu Kush. Behind her, the line of cars had stalled completely. 3 cars back, a young staff sergeant named Reynolds sat in his pickup truck. He had his window down, listening to the commotion. He couldn't hear every word, but he saw the body language. He saw the aggressive posture of Sergeant Vance and the dismissive hand-waving of Airman Miller. Reynolds squinted at the blue sedan. He noticed something the gate guards had missed in their arrogance. On the rear bumper, almost obscured by a bit of road dust, was a small, faded sticker. It wasn't a standard base decal. It was a silhouette of a specific aircraft, a C-130 Hercules, surrounded by a wreath, and next to it a small silver emblem that looked like a pair of pilot wings. He looked at the woman's profile in the side mirror. He didn't know her face, but he knew the posture. He had seen that stillness before in briefing rooms and on flight lines. It was the stillness of someone who was waiting for the storm to break. Then he remembered the email that had gone out that morning, the all-hands message about the change of command ceremony scheduled for Tuesday. The attachment had a photo. He grabbed his phone from the passenger seat, scrolling frantically through his inbox. He opened the PDF.
Colonel Erica Walsh, 3,500 flight hours, Distinguished Flying Cross. He zoomed in on the photo. The woman in the picture was in service dress, hair pulled back, expression stern, but the eyes were the same, and the jawline. Reynolds felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He opened his door and stepped out onto the hot asphalt. "Hey!" Miller shouted, spotting him. "Stay in your vehicle!" Reynolds ignored him. He jogged up the line, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Sergeant Vance, hold on a second." Vance spun around, angry at the interruption. "Get back in your truck, Sergeant. We have a situation here." "I think you're making a mistake," Reynolds said, keeping his voice low. As he approached the driver's side window of the sedan, he looked at Erica. She turned to look at him, her eyes guarded. Reynolds looked at the dashboard. He saw the CAC card lying there. He couldn't read the text from this angle, but he saw the silver oak leaves on the shoulders of the uniform in the ID photo. "Ma'am?" Reynolds said, snapping to a position of attention, even though he was in civilian clothes. "Are you Colonel Walsh?" Erica looked at him, surprised by the sudden recognition. "Yes, Sergeant, I am." Reynolds swallowed hard. He turned to Vance. "Vance, you need to scan her ID. That's the new wing commander." Vance looked from Reynolds to Erica and back again. He let out a harsh laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. She got to you too? Look at her, Reynolds. Does she look like a wing commander to you? She looks like she's lost on her way to the mall." "She's the incoming commander," Reynolds insisted, his voice rising. "Check your email. The photo matches. And look at the ID on the dash. That's an officer's CAC. Miller walked over, shaking his head. "It's a fake, man. She probably printed it off the internet. We're pulling her out." Reynolds stepped between Miller and the car door. "Don't do it, Miller. I'm telling you, if you touch that door handle, your career is over." Vance shoved Reynolds aside. "Stand down, Staff Sergeant. That is a direct order. You are interfering with security forces operations. Get back in your truck or I will arrest you alongside her." Reynolds stumbled back but didn't leave. He pulled his phone out. "I'm calling the command post. Vance, you're about to step on a landmine." "Call whoever you want," Vance spat. Vance turned back to Erica. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "Last chance, lady. Step out of the car, hands where I can see them." Erica took a deep breath. She looked at the handcuffs, then up at Vance's face. "I am giving you a direct order, Technical Sergeant Vance," Erica said, her voice dropping an octave, resonating with absolute authority. "Secure your equipment and call the command post yourself. Ask for the Vice Commander, Colonel Harris. Tell him Erica Walsh is at the gate and is being denied entry." Vance hesitated for a fraction of a second. The certainty in her voice pierced his bias, but his pride was too far gone. He had an audience now, the line of cars, his subordinate, the insubordinate Sergeant Reynolds. He couldn't back down to a woman in a blue blouse. "Refusing a lawful order," Vance announced, loudly for the benefit of the onlookers. He reached for the door handle. It was locked. He banged his fist on the window. "Open the door!" Inside the car, Erica didn't flinch. She simply watched him. She knew that Reynolds was making the call. She just had to wait. Inside the base headquarters, the air was cool and smelled of floor wax and coffee. Lieutenant Colonel Harris, the vice commander, was reviewing the final logistics for the change of command ceremony when his desk phone rang. It was the emergency line from the command post. "Harris, here." "Sir, this is the controller. We just received a call from a Staff Sergeant Reynolds at the main gate. He states that security forces is attempting to arrest the incoming commander." Harris froze. "Repeat that?" "The incoming commander, sir, Colonel Walsh. She's at the gate in her POV. The gate guards, well, the report is that they don't believe she's who she says she is. They're threatening to extract her from the vehicle." Harris dropped his pen. It bounced off the desk with a clatter. "Get the command chief," Harris barked, already moving toward the door, "and tell the security forces squadron commander to meet us at the main gate immediately. Tell them to sprint." Back at the gate, the tension had reached a breaking point. Vance had his baton out now, tapping it menacingly against his thigh. "I'm going to break the window if you don't open it," Vance shouted. Miller was standing by the passenger side, looking less certain now that Reynolds was shouting into his phone a few yards away. "Maybe we should just scan the card, Sarge," Miller muttered, "just to be sure." "Shut up, Miller," Vance snapped. "We're committed. She's resisting." Erica watched Vance raise the baton. She prepared to cover her face from the glass. She wasn't afraid, exactly. She was disappointed. She was angry that this was the state of the unit she was inheriting. But mostly, she was calculating how she would rebuild this broken culture. Suddenly, the wail of sirens cut through the air, not one, but three. Vance paused, the baton hovering in the air. From the direction of the base, a convoy of vehicles roared toward the gate, driving in the outbound lanes against traffic. The security forces' SUV led the pack, lights flashing blue and red. Behind it was a black government sedan, and behind that, another SUV. They screeched to a halt just 10 feet from the guard shack. Doors flew open before the wheels had fully stopped. Vance lowered his baton, looking confused. "Back up," he yelled at the approaching vehicles. "We have a situation here." The first person out of the lead SUV was Major Strickland, the security force's squadron commander. He didn't look like he was there to help Vance. He looked furious. "Stand down," Strickland bellowed, his voice echoing off the concrete barriers. "Vance, get away from that car." Vance stumbled back, his eyes widening. "Major, sir, we have an intruder." From the black sedan, Lieutenant Colonel Harris emerged. He was followed by Chief Master Sergeant Ortega, the command chief of the wing. Ortega was a formidable woman, tall and imposing, her uniform immaculate. Vance looked from the major to the vice commander to the command chief. His face went from red to a ghostly pale in the span of a heartbeat. Harris didn't even look at Vance. He walked straight to the driver's side of the blue sedan. He tapped gently on the glass. Erica unlocked the doors. She opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit her instantly, but she stood tall, smoothing the front of her royal blue blouse. She looked at Harris, then at the stunned faces of Vance and Miller. "Colonel," Harris said, snapping a crisp salute, "I am incredibly sorry, ma'am." Erica returned the salute, her hands sharp and precise, contrasting with her civilian clothes in a way that made the gesture even more powerful. "Thank you, Colonel Harris," she said. Chief Ortega stepped forward, her eyes blazing as she looked at the two gate guards, then softening as she turned to Erica. She saluted. "Welcome to Heritage, Colonel Walsh," Ortega said. "We've been expecting you, though not like this." Erica nodded to the chief. "Good to see you, Chief." Vance dropped his baton. It clattered loudly on the pavement, the sound like a gunshot in the sudden silence. He stood there, mouth open, looking at the woman he had just threatened to drag through broken glass. He whispered. The word tasted like ash. Miller was shaking. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the asphalt. Erica turned slowly to face them. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. She didn't yell, she didn't rage, she simply walked over to Vance, stopping just outside his personal space. She looked at the name tape on his vest. "Technical Sergeant Vance," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, Colonel," he stammered, snapping to a rigid position of attention. "You refused to scan a Department of Defense identification card because the holder did not fit your assumption of what an officer looks like," Erica stated. "Is that correct?" "No, ma'am. Vance trailed off. There was no excuse. You thought I was a spouse. You thought I was a civilian. You thought I was a girl who needed to be put in her place, Erica continued, her voice hard as steel. And because of that bias, you failed to perform the most basic function of your post. You escalated a routine ID check into a hostage situation. She turned to Miller. And you, Airman, you mocked a visitor. You weaponized your authority to belittle someone you perceived as having less power than you. Miller stared straight ahead, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. Sorry, ma'am. Erica looked around at the gathered crowd, the drivers leaning out of their windows, the young Sergeant Reynolds who had intervened, the terrified guards. Let's be clear, she said, raising her voice so everyone could hear. Standards are the bedrock of this profession, but standards applied with bias are not standards. They are oppression. You do not earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by giving it. She pointed to the gate. If I were a terrorist with a stolen ID and a haircut you approved of, would you have let me in? She asked Vance. Vance swallowed.
Probably, ma'am. And because I am a woman in a blue shirt, you were ready to arrest the installation commander. That is a failure of operational security, and it is a failure of character. Major Strickland stepped forward. Ma'am, I will relieve them of duty immediately. They will be facing disciplinary action. Erica held up a hand. Not yet, Major. She looked at Vance. Pick up your baton, Sergeant. Vance scrambled to pick it up, his hands fumbling. You will finish your shift, Erica said, and every single car that comes through this line you will treat with the absolute highest level of courtesy and professionalism. You will salute the officers, you will thank the spouses, and you will respect the civilians. You will stand in this heat, and you will think about who you serve. Do you understand me? Yes, Colonel, Vance shouted, his voice cracking. And tomorrow, Erica said, her eyes narrowing, you and Airman Miller will report to my office at 0700 in service dress. We are going to have a very long conversation about the difference between authority and bullying. Yes, Colonel, they said in unison. Erica turned back to Harrison and Strickland. Gentlemen, I believe I have a base to run. She walked back to her car. Reynolds, the young sergeant who had called it in, was standing by the fender, looking astruck. Erica stopped in front of him. What is your name, Sergeant? She asked. Staff Sergeant Reynolds, ma'am. You have good instinct, Sergeant Reynolds, Erica said, offering him a small, genuine smile. And you have moral courage that is harder to find than tactical proficiency. Thank you for having my 6. She reached into her purse, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and pulled out a coin. It was heavy, shaped like a shield with the emblem of her previous command on it. She pressed it into his hand. Reynolds looked down at the coin, then back at her. Thank you, Colonel. Erica got into her car. She put her sunglasses back on. She looked out the window at Miller, who was now standing at the scanner, looking terrified. She held her CAC out the window. Scan the ID, Airman Miller. Miller rushed forward, taking the card with trembling hands. He scanned it. The machine beeped, a happy, confirming green light. Welcome to Heritage Air Force Base, Colonel Walsh, Miller said, his voice barely a whisper. Carry on, Erica said. She rolled up the window, the cool air of the AC washing over her. As she drove through the gate, passing the saluting major and chief, she didn't look back at the 2 men who had tried to make her feel small. She looked forward, toward the runway in the distance, where the gray tails of the aircraft sat in neat rows. There was work to do. 6 weeks later, the air at the base exchange was cool and smelled of popcorn. Erica walked through the aisles, pushing a small cart. She was in uniform now, flight suit, flight cap tucked into her belt, the command insignia pinned to her chest. She turned the corner into the aisle with the cleaning supplies and stopped. Standing there, stocking shelves, was Airman Miller. He wasn't wearing a beret. He was wearing the utility uniform of the Civil Engineer Squadron, but currently he was on a detail. He looked up and froze when he saw her. He set down the box of detergent he was holding and snapped to attention. "Ma'am," he said. Erica stopped her cart. "At ease." Airman Miller relaxed slightly, but he looked nervous. He looked tired. "How is the retraining going?" she asked. She looked at him, not with malice, but with a firm expectation. "I saw the report from your flight chief," she said. "He says you're the first one in and the last one out lately." Miller looked surprised. "He does?" "He does," Erica nodded. "He says you've stopped making assumptions and started reading the regulations." "I learned the hard way, ma'am," Miller said, looking at his boots. "That's usually the way the lesson sticks," Erica said. She reached out and picked up a bottle of detergent from the box he was holding. "Sergeant Vance?" she asked. "He put in his retirement papers, ma'am," Miller said. "He didn't have it in him to relearn the job the right way." Erica nodded. "That was his choice. You made a different one. You chose to stay and get better." She placed the detergent in her cart. "Don't let me down, Airman Miller. I need guards at that gate who know what they're looking for, not just the uniform, but the person wearing it." "I won't let you down, Colonel," Miller said, and for the first time his voice held the weight of genuine respect, not fear. Erica smiled, a quick, sharp expression. "See you around the base, Airman." She pushed her cart forward, turning the corner. She had a wing to fly, people to lead, and a standard to set. And she knew, as she walked away, that the young airman behind her was standing a little taller than he had before. It wasn't about the rank on the collar, it was about the valor in the action. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you were wrong and get back to work. If you enjoyed this story of justice and leadership, please like the video and subscribe to She Chose Valor. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that true strength doesn't always wear a uniform, and assumptions can be the most dangerous enemy of all. Until next time, stay strong.